Hey guys, we have a special guest visiting us at the tavern today. We have indie wrestler, the human monster truck, Perry Von Vicious. What's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely,
Definitely,
man.
man.
Absolutely. What's been going on in the world of the human monster truck?
Obviously, with things opening back up a bit, I've been able to get back out and wrestle again, which has been great. I just wrestled for Pro Wrestling Grind this past weekend in Northampton, Massachusetts, and kind of quickly becoming my home promotion. It's geographically certainly the closest one to me. Only usually about a half-hour drive to those shows, which is a welcome change because
Yeah, that's not bad.
yeah. Before COVID, I was on the road a lot. I'd be in Chicago, Nova Scotia, Texas, New Orleans, all over the place. And yeah, it's nice to be back home sleeping in my own bed after a show.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a lot of miles between those cities when you can just go a half hour and come home.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, you've wrestled with Northeast Championship Wrestling, CCW, Limitless, Black Label Pro, Beyond. I mean, can you just broad stroke for maybe some of the people that just watch the mainstream stuff and may not know, can you broad stroke the life of an independent wrestler, like working the road, how you secure your bookings for new promotions? Like, just kind of give us the cliff notes and sum up the life of an independent wrestler.
Sure. I mean, and there's obviously a lot of variation within that. There are some indie wrestlers who it's all they do. It is the full-time job for them, and they're being flown all over the place. And then there's indie wrestlers. When I first started, it was very much a weekend warrior thing for me, where I was doing the shows within my local area for far less money than I'd be comfortable even saying.
Yeah.
Just being happy to be included. And I fall somewhere right in the middle at this point in my career, where my week looks like I have a regular day job during the week. I actually work for a very well-known women's college in fundraising, which is a great contrast to my pro wrestling character. I have a regular job during the week, but then I'm also going to the gym. I'm managing my social presence. I'm filming promos at home on the opposite side here. You're looking at my wall with my lights. Opposite, right in front of me, is a big green screen that I keep in the basement, so that I can film promos to hype the shows that I'm on. And then come Friday, sometimes Thursday, sometimes even as early as Wednesday, I'm off on the road, almost always driving, very rarely on a plane, sometimes for very long trips and sometimes nice and close. And I typically have anywhere from, on a slow weekend, one show, and other weekends, 4 or 5 shows in a weekend, and just cruising between them. I'm about to enter my 14th year of doing this, and it doesn't appear to be slowing down for me just yet, but we'll see. As you approach your 40s, I feel like the body slows down a lot, and a lot of interest will go away. But for the time being, I'm hopping in there with guys a decade younger than me, and hanging in there.
So I imagine it's got to be a juggle for you. You've got the 9 to 5, you're staying busy, you're promoting yourself. Like, what drives you to be that busy with these things? Like, is it the pure love of it? Like, what is the thing that keeps you like, I love doing this?
I love this question so much, because you could ask 100 wrestlers and you'll get 100 different answers, and almost all of them will be lying to you, or lying to themselves, or both. There is one answer that is universally true to this question for every single professional wrestler, whether they're signed to a major company or they are doing every small little show nearby. The thing that drives you to repeatedly hurt yourself, drive incredible numbers of miles, and to spend every moment of your free time, working out and posting and managing your socials is one word: ego.
Yeah.
We as performers have massive egos. It all comes from different places. Some people maybe didn't get enough attention from their parents. Some people maybe got too much attention from their parents. And we're all coping with it and covering for it now. For me, I've been in almost every form of performance art you can imagine, and ego pushed me to professional wrestling. I started in chorus in high school, where it was me and 250 other kids. Not enough attention for Perry. Then I was in select chorus, me and 40 other kids. Still not enough. Jazz band, 20 other kids. We're getting there. Toured in a punk band, did Warped Tour for a couple summers, but that's me and 6 other guys. Still too many.
Yeah.
Finally, I got to pro wrestling, and it's just me and an opponent. And that seems to be my happy place. I did do stand up for a few years where it was just me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I missed. There's something about the physicality of wrestling where you're physically and emotionally exerting yourself, and it brings a reaction that to me was just a little more exciting than presenting a joke that you had thought of and worked on and getting a reaction.
Right.
That felt very fast and very, it went away. And the scene I was doing stand up in was in Santa Cruz, California, and it was a great scene. I mean, I could do 6 shows a week without leaving town. And the problem was the crew of comics who lived in that area and would come in from San Jose and a few other areas was not a big crew. And eventually they'd heard your stuff so much that you were like, all right, I really need new material. And so you were constantly, and that got to be a little grating.
There's nothing like the ego of the performer. And I lived in Los Angeles for several years. A lot of my friends were actors. I'm a writer, played kind of the Hollywood game for a while. So when you're around performers or artists, for lack of a better word, creative people, I think all of us are driven by that ego of validation, like what you're doing, whether it be the instant roar of the crowd or having someone read your stuff and be like, man, this is good. That ego. I love that you said that, because a lot of people will say the fans or the love of the game or whatever, but it really does come down to that ego.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the reason that professional wrestlers are just as happy to play the role of the hated villain as they are to play the role of the beloved babyface. It's because we don't actually care if the fans like us.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure that they are connected enough with us that there's a visceral reaction that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about one thing I wanted to ask you about was I love your promos that you pump out on social media, hyping the events. And you said you had, I assumed by the level that you were pumping out that you had a green screen set up in your house somewhere or somewhere close by. Can you talk about a little bit about how you video them and what benefit that original content on social media is for independent wrestlers? Because I think that's a huge part of the indie scene that we're seeing a lot of, especially during the pandemic. I feel like a lot of people jumped on that, of just that DIY self-promotion.
So it's something that I learned really early on, and I feel very grateful to have picked it up so early. When I was brand new to wrestling, I looked nothing like I look now. When you look at my, like my promo pictures or anything, that obviously right now I just look like some dude. But when you see my promo pictures and stuff, I'm kind of big and I can flex and I look like a wrestler.
Right.
When I started, I was a 300-pound fat guy who'd never done a sport in his life.
Wow.
I looked like a less athletic King Kong Bundy. Um, and I learned very quickly, doing essentially what was a rich snob character at the time, that the thing that people reacted to was if I could really like do something funny or interesting with that character. So I started a little video series. And mind you, this is 2008. I'm doing this. So this is like YouTube is still a baby.
Wow.
Yeah.
And no, and Twitter had just started. I joined Twitter really early on, I think the very beginning of '09. And had my Twitter at the time was fully in character just to try to promote stuff.
Right.
And I couldn't find any other wrestlers on Twitter at the time. Uh, and I started a little YouTube series called Perry Von Vicious Hates. And they were just little 2-3 minute sketches where something would inconvenience me. It would cut to a close up of my face with a narration that says Perry Von Vicious hates, and it was whatever the thing was. And then I would kick whatever it was in the head. It was almost always a friend playing like, there was like a child or a homeless person. It was just, I hated everybody
Yeah.
and I would kick them in the head. And that did pretty well out here before I moved away to California. I'm in Massachusetts. I've moved back since, but at the time in Massachusetts, it did pretty well. And some people out here took note. I moved to California and I did more videos because I didn't really have any bookings. I didn't know anybody and I had just started training out there. So there was one company, the one that I was training with, put me on the shows. But I wanted more, once a month, once every other month really felt like a big letdown.
Right.
So I started doing the videos because I had to do something. And All Pro Wrestling out there, Roland Alexander's company from Beyond the Mat, got a hold of me and said, "Hey, we saw your sketches on YouTube. We'd really like to bring you in. Can you debut on such and such date?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And then I found out they started using clips from my videos and hyping me on their big screen at the shows leading up to my debut. I didn't know. I wasn't even there.
Right.
And the first night I'm there, they had me go over 3 matches in a row and win the Young Lions Cup,
Oh, wow.
and then come out in the main event and attack the champion and cost him the championship, putting me right into a main event feud.
That's
Wow.
crazy.
And it was based pure. They had never seen me wrestle. It was based purely on they liked the video sketches. They liked that I was taking the initiative, and they'd asked around about me and people said, "Oh yeah, no, he's good. You'll like him." And
Yeah.
that was good enough for them. They wrote me right into it the first night I showed up. So since then, I've kept the video stuff. It feels important to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's proof right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what I realized was as time went on, and my social media following grew, it's not huge, but it's pretty good. What I realized was a lot of promotions that I was working for had fewer followers than I did,
Right.
which meant if I posted a video hyping my match at their show and included the name of the event, the date, where to get tickets, etc., now all of a sudden that many more people know about their show and I'm a huge asset to them.
Right.
So I've kept doing it, and even promotions that don't ask me to or don't really need the help, a lot of the places, most of the places I work currently, they sell out their venues every
Right.
time they run. So they're not dying for my help, but it also keeps me relevant.
Right.
And that as much was evident when Grind ran their first show. Since coming, we're not out of the pandemic, but since coming back to performing since the pandemic has begun,
Right.
the human monster truck was a new thing. That
Yeah.
that didn't exist pre-pandemic. That's a new thing I'm doing. And since it came back, I'd been in a lot of in a scramble match here or a tag match there. There's just everyone's trying to get on shows at once. So you're squeezing people in where you can. Grind was one of my first straight up single matches since then. And in an area where there hadn't really been shows in 2 years in Western Massachusetts. There was a company running and they kind of stopped before the pandemic. And not much had come back. So they hadn't seen me out here in a long time. And I put it purely on the work I'd been doing online, posting just stuff about monster trucks, stuff about Disney parks, stuff that I liked,
Yeah.
Right.
that, the people who were going to enjoy that found me and latched onto it. And then having the videos so that, there's a connection there, that when I came through their entryway, I mean, I've never in 14 years had a reaction like that. It was incredible.
That's
It was a hero's welcome, and it felt great. And I just thought it felt like it was validating for the video work.
So that seems like that can't be talked about enough for indie wrestlers. It's not just about getting the shows and doing to go that extra. I mean, I look at someone right now who's blowing up, and well wishes to him to get better, but someone like Danhausen, I mean, that was all built through social media, a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, I talked with him shortly before his injury. He was up at Limitless, and we were at the show, and we were chatting about it. And he was telling me, you got to keep pumping out the content. The more people see that, the more you become. It's really, the internet's replacing television, right?
Right.
We grew up in a time when David Letterman was a personality you knew.
Right.
Jerry Seinfeld was a personality you knew. If you ran into them somewhere, you would have things that came to mind that you could say to them based on what you'd seen. And now that's what the internet is. And when people scroll through their feed, there's a million things, but they start to learn some of the characters the same way we did from television. And so now when people see me, I mean, I was at Limitless recently. I wasn't booked. I was there helping. I'll go up and I'll help with camera crew or something if I'm not on the show. And a fan who couldn't have known I was there because I wasn't advertised had somehow figured out I was going up with Rip Bison and with Johnny Torres, who's on commentary there, and brought a stack of monster truck 8x10s that were autographed from when he was a kid, and was like, hey, I figured you'd probably like these. You can put them up, in your gym, in your basement or something, because he was aware of everything I do. So now I have those, which is very cool. But like,
that's so awesome, man.
That kind of stuff keeps happening. Fans I haven't met will come up to me and they'll say like, hey, who's your favorite monster? They have questions in mind.
Yeah.
And I just debuted for Atlantic Pro Wrestling out by Boston a couple weeks ago. Never wrestled there. Didn't know most of their audience. They certainly didn't seem to know me. But in the course of the first half of the show, before I wrestled, I was in the main event. Before I wrestled, by the time intermission came around, they'd figured it out because I was on the program, and they'd all gone on their phones and they found my Twitter. And I went to the merch table fully expecting people to just be walking by. And people were coming up like, I want that shirt. I want this thing. You've got these. I saw this on your Twitter and I want to buy it. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I can't stress enough to people, that like people don't think enough about. Like you said, Danhausen's a great example. Warhorse, same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's arguments. Effie, same thing.
Yeah.
Having a fantastic online presence and being sort of niche in what you do and what you are and what your look is, because that means so much more to the people it connects with. John Cena can be liked by anybody, but that means he's loved by very few.
Right. Yeah, that I always talk about the Andy Warhol type of thing, where he spoke about mass producing things, and he said, if I put this Campbell's soup can out there and I reprint it and stick it everywhere, it embeds itself in the psyche of people without them even realizing it. And I feel like when you put yourself out there like that, we will see that stuff and it will seep in before we even realize what it is. And then we find out, oh, I've seen this guy. And I feel like there's a lot of that to it.
I love that you brought this whole process back to someone who's not necessarily, wouldn't be seen in the same way as a pro wrestler, but instead is just an artist.
Right.
There's a band that I always tell people I love, but they're a hard band to actually love as far as like, oh, I'm going to listen to them for a while. They're a visual thing more than anything, and it's The Residents. And if you're not familiar, they've been around since the 70s. They have something like 90 albums.
Wow.
I'm not convinced anyone in the band knows how to play an instrument. No one knows who any of the band members are because they've never shown their faces in all those decades.
Wow.
And they've made short films. They had early DVD ROMs and CD-ROM games and like just all this bizarre stuff that they put out. And the reason they were able to do this very like avant-garde, strange art in what they did and to put it everywhere was because they never showed themselves. So
Right.
they were completely uninhibited. They refer to it as the theory of obscurity, that the moment an artist becomes well known is the moment they start holding back and second guessing,
Yeah.
because that's when they're worried about being judged. For me, I wish I'd thought of that at the beginning of my career. Instead, now I've hit the point where, because I'm closing in on my 40s, I can feel, there's a very clear end of the tunnel here in terms
Right.
of life as an indie wrestler. So what do I care? If people decide I'm not for them, there's other people.
Right.
And so now I've just decided I'm going to do whatever I think makes me happy, whatever makes me laugh, whatever I would love to have seen. And the people who want it, they'll find me.
Awesome. So speaking of the independents, if you were to tell a wrestling fan who maybe only watches the major companies why they should come out and support independent wrestling, what would you tell them? Why is independent wrestling important to you, and why should it be important to every wrestling fan?
Well, I think the first thing I would say if I was talking to this hypothetical fan is I would ask them to list their 10 favorite wrestlers that they watch. And when they did, I would then happily tell them a decade ago, I knew many of them personally, and I watched them on a platform where rather than 5 minutes per match, they could have 20-minute matches and they could
Right.
do anything they wanted. And they were completely uninhibited by TV times or censors or, oh, we want your toy to sell to little kids, so we can't have you hit anyone with a chair.
Yeah.
I would tell them, if you ever wanted to see your favorite wrestler given complete freedom in what they do, that's the indies. And if you go to an independent show now, guaranteed 10 years from now, your favorites from that show will be the superstars.
Yeah.
That's just how it works. When I was going to indie shows before I ever trained, I was going to ROH shows around 2006, 2007 when I was in college, and I was seeing Bryan Danielson. I was seeing Claudio or Cesaro. I was, Kenny Omega,
Right.
Seth Rollins. All of them were there. And now when I look at like the top rosters in any of these companies, it's just a who's who of who I saw on those shows.
Right. It's really like it's like you're going to a college sports game or a minor league game. You're seeing the next wave of talent mixed with some of the classic talent that has maybe been at the top and came down.
I would liken it to if you go see Green Day today, you will have, for a reasonable price, a nosebleed seat. You will hear them just fine, but they'll be itty bitty and far away. It'll be a very impersonal experience.
Right.
And it'll be a great time because I've seen them since they've started playing arenas. It'll be great. But imagine if you could have seen them in a small club in your town for a third the price and been right at the foot of the stage in a time when they were still hungry.
Yep.
And trying to earn what they wanted and to prove themselves. Now, if they're not feeling it, and I doubt that this has ever really been the case, because when I've seen them, they have a lot of energy. But if they ever wanted to, they could phone it in for a night.
Yeah.
Why not? They've made their money. It's not like, oh no, my career will go away. They're
Yeah.
going to be fine. And certainly, like you can almost see it with certain wrestlers that go to like WWE, and you watch how they were in the Indies, and you watch them there, and you go, oh, okay, they've wisely, I think, switched to longevity mode.
Right.
They're trying not to injure themselves. They're still telling the stories. They're still being athletic, but there's an edginess that's gone. And a lot of them, you see it come back when they leave that company. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a few over in AEW who their work since they left WWE has
Brian
been turned.
Danielson.
Brian Danielson, Ambrose.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible to see the difference when a lot of the limitations are taken away.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that creative freedom. And there's something I love that you kind of related it back to, a punk band, and there's something about seeing someone in a small venue when they're still full of piss and vinegar and willing to take risks and lay it on the fucking line. And you don't get that with the big stuff. And I feel like fans who maybe say they love pro wrestling, but they don't go to that local show, you're really missing out on a whole other element. I mean, it's cool to go see the band at the arena. I that's fun, but man, there's something about going to that little dingy bar and seeing that band just rip it up.
There's a specific moment I can even relate it to, where it's not even like, oh, you see them go harder, or oh, you see them when they're hungry. The art form itself is completely different up close. When you see on TV, they pull the mats up, and someone gets bumped on the concrete or whatever it is. Intellectually, that hurts.
Right.
Right. Intellectually, that's bad.
Yeah.
I remember going to a Ring of Honor show my last year of college, and in the very first match, someone just took a body slam on the floor, and it was a hardwood floor in a big gym. We were in probably the 7th or 8th row back, and the sound and the fact that I could feel the floor jerk just a little under my feet. There's something so visceral about being there for that, and being up close when there's chops and strikes, and you can, not just see and not just hear like on TV, but like you feel it when you're that close. It's a completely different experience, and it gives you a lot more appreciation for what's actually going on in there. And there's also an element of like fear and danger, right? Seeing someone do a moonsault on TV, sure, I've seen people do backflips in movies and stuff. Okay. But when you're right there and you're watching someone that high in the air be completely upside down in a position where they could really get hurt, there's an element of fear that happens there.
Absolutely. It's so up and in your face. I took my girlfriend and her little boy, who's 7 years old, to a show at Conquest Pro Wrestling in Charleston, West Virginia. And Mance Warner was in a bunkhouse match, and they're all over the place. And he's never been to a wrestling show, and they're fighting right beside him. And he's legit. So he looks at my girlfriend and is like, I want to go. This is unsafe. And I'm like, that's exactly the reaction you want at an independent show. You want to blow people away. And there was such a pure reaction from a child that I loved it.
Yeah. That kind of stuff that's stuff that you remember forever. And hopefully he remembers it in a positive way, but it's something you never forget.
Yeah, exactly. Now this is a little off topic, but you've got pictures of tiki and other chickens on your Instagram page. So I wanted to ask you to tell us about these chickens.
So my wife and I, but my wife far more than most people, is an animal lover. And we've always had cats, and before I came along, she had guinea pigs and hamsters and hedgehogs and all manner of thing. And when we finally bought a home, we were like, okay, now we can have something that lives outside.
Right.
And we started looking at our options. Goats were considered and are still on the table. But essentially we decided, with COVID going on, we're sort of limited in a lot of ways because there were, especially early on, you didn't want to go walking into any stores if you could help it.
Right.
So we were able to, with lumber that was kicking around in my dad's garage. My parents just live like 10 minutes up the road, which is really nice. But with lumber kicking around there and some stuff from some structures we took down on our property, we were able to build a coop and a very small chicken run.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we said, well, great. Well, let's get chickens. So we got 3. That's like the minimum order you can do when you order them online. And then this past spring, we got 3 more. One turned out to be a surprise rooster. Happens from time to time.
Yeah.
They try to send you girls, but when they're this big, it's a crapshoot. So the rooster has gone to another chicken farm across town where they were in dire need of a rooster to keep their girls in line. But with us, with such a small flock, he was just going to be a terror.
Yeah.
They can be a little rough, but yeah, we have 5 chickens. 2 of them are a rather rare breed, the Swedish flower hen, and they are hilarious because they're gorgeous and they behave like cats. They just they'll come right up and get on your lap, and they're just happy to hang out with you.
That's awesome.
We have one Easter egger who lays these fantastic teal eggs. And then we have 2 Barred Rock, the Plymouth Rock, which is sort of like a baseline standard if you're getting egg layers. And they're both, they both have attitudes.
Yeah.
But they're all 5 of them are named after references to things within the Disney parks because we are great big Disney parks nerds.
That's all. What's your favorite park?
My favorite park is the original Disneyland in California. It was the first one I ever got to go to when I was a kid. It was the first vacation my family ever took. I was the ripe old age of 13 when we took a vacation for the first time. I grew up relatively poor. So my parents had been saving and saving and saving. And by the time their firstborn was 13, we were able to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And then my wife and I were actually married there 10 years ago. We just went back a few weeks ago and had our 10-year wedding anniversary in the park.
Oh, that's awesome.
Great.
I've never been to Disneyland. Even when I lived out there, I just never went. And I'm kicking myself for it now because, I lived in Orlando and I loved the Orlando park. As a kid, my dad took me there a few times and I always liked, I know they've changed the name now, but to me it was MGM Studios because I'm a movie nerd. So I loved going there. I think it's called Hollywood Studios now, but
it is. And if you get the chance to go back, man, the stuff they've done is fantastic.
Really?
I've seen a lot of the stuff that they've done with like the Star Wars and all that stuff, which looks insane.
The ride that I always loved, and it's not a thrill ride, but when I was like 10 years old, my dad took me on it. And it blew my mind because I was such a fan of movies, even at a young age, was the Great Movie Ride. I love that.
R.I.P. Yeah, it is not there anymore, and it breaks my heart. There's I don't know if you've seen there's a YouTube channel called Defunct Land.
Oh yeah.
They do deep dives into stuff that's not in the parks anymore. The episode on the Great Movie Ride is fantastic. They have another episode though. Where they talk about how there was supposed to be a whole Muppets land there. And that fell through when Jim Henson died. The family called off the deal with Disney. And it's a shame because one of the rides that was going to be there was going to be called the Great Muppet Movie Ride. And it was going to be the Great Movie Ride, but done by the Muppets. So it was going to be a duplicate of the ride, but all Muppets.
Oh,
that would have been great.
Yeah, that haunts me on a daily basis. I think about that.
I watched a document. I don't know if it was from Defunct Land, but there was a YouTube documentary that went into the water park that they shut down and just left. I think it's still there. Which one? Because there's multiple water parks there.
River
Country, maybe.
it had a great name like that. It's not Critter Country. It had another name, but yeah, I believe that was Defunctland. They've put out some really good longer videos recently. One that is near and dear to me because it touches so many of my dumb interests.
Yeah.
It's about a band called Halix, which was a band that only existed in Tomorrowland in California for one summer in the 80s. They were like, oh, we need something that like teenagers will like. So let's open like a little rock club and have a band. But if we put it in Tomorrowland, the band has to be all aliens and stuff. So they had like this weird knockoff Wookiee and like everyone in the band was like in full costume except for the singer, who was just kind of dressed, I don't know what, 80s futuristic, whatever that entailed. And it's a wild story because they were actually like really good. And the music didn't exist. You couldn't find any of it anymore because it was the 80s, you know, it wasn't recorded or anything. But Defunctland got the band to reunite and re-record their songs.
That's wild.
Oh, that's crazy.
So like it had everything that I love. It had Disney parks. It had like weird suburban esoterica. It had a novelty band, which is like I'm crazy about costume and novelty bands. So yeah, it was the perfect documentary for me, and I devoured it like I was starving.
That's super cool.
I'll tell you one thing I like to do. I love Disney parks. So one thing I like to do is get on YouTube and I'll do full ride, like watch along going through the rides.
Yeah.
I know it sounds pretty nerdy, but I love
I'll give you my favorite life hack. They have the area music that plays in different parts of the park. Like, you know, it's hour-long loops of like background music that plays on Main Street USA or in Tomorrowland. Right.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to do on a Monday when I just really don't feel like doing anything at my job, the earbuds go in and the Main Street USA loop comes on. And it doesn't matter what work I'm doing. If I close my eyes, I swear I can smell the churros and the coffee.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
It's a very specific feeling, but as soon as you start hearing it, you're like, yeah, this is always in the background. Yeah.
That's so awesome, man.
I always find myself craving a galactic gobbler from Tomorrowland, the big turkey leg.
Mm-hmm.
You know, going to Disneyland, because I did get to go to Disneyland once. I think I had only done Disney World before, and then I went to Disneyland, and it was a lot of fun riding Matterhorn Mountain out there because it just seemed like it was just from the beginnings of Disney.
Yeah.
It seemed untouched from the original park.
Yeah. There's such the thing for me is like the two parks, because, you know, Magic Kingdom in Orlando and Disneyland are essentially the same thing. Disneyland is a little bit smaller, but it's the same park, right? They have the same lands, the same sort of layout. To me, the biggest difference is just the vibe. And it's because Disney World, you have people from all over the world coming in. People have saved their whole lives. This is the one trip they're getting. They're stressed. They've traveled. They're jet lagged. They've got 20 kids with them, you know, some of them theirs, like some people bring like the neighbors' kids with them because it's the only chance they'll get, you know. Right. They've got grandma and grandpa with them in the rascal scooters. They are stressed, they are loud, and they are not always happy. It's hot and they're under the sun and they are on edge.
Yeah.
And it can be very unpleasant because of that sometimes. California, though, at least now, you know, it could change. They have a lot of big plans to turn it into a big tourist stop. It's become kind of a locals park. There's people who only go into that park, like, you know, they get out of work for the day and they call up a buddy and say, hey, I was thinking of going and grabbing a churro. You want to pop into the park and ride Space Mountain? Because they have annual passes and they live nearby. They just go pop in. So they're not stressed. They couldn't care less. They live up the road. And it's such a different, you know, I say the easiest way you can tell the difference is just ride the Haunted Mansion. You ride the Haunted Mansion in Florida, it's just all these people.
Right. Yep.
You ride the Haunted Mansion in California and it's a goddamn sing-along. That entire opening spiel when you're in the stretching room,
Yeah.
they're all saying every line along with it. It's
awesome.
like going to see like a great punk band and they have the one song that everyone's, Look What Happened by Less Than Jake or The Best of Me by The Starting Line. The whole crowd does it all at once.
That's
And
awesome.
it's a blast.
So getting back to the social, how you promote yourself on social media and how important that is. You do something that I've never seen any other wrestler do. You started creating your own 4-inch scale action figures and monster trucks with a 3D printer that your wife bought you, I think. Okay. Talk about this process, because those figures are super cool, man. Like, I saw that and I'm like, that is genius. One, I could never operate a 3D printer, I don't think, but it's so cool to see you just create your own figures like that. And they reminded me of the old school Star Wars figures. Like
That's exactly the scale I went with. I went for Kenner Star Wars. That way, again, Disney parks nerd.
Yeah.
So many things come back to that for me. For our anniversary, my wife got me the scale toy of the ride vehicle from Star Tours.
Oh, nice.
And it's to scale with the Kenner figures. So you can put, 3PO and R2D2 and everybody in it. And so my figure can just sit in there.
That's awesome.
And goes right inside. So for me, that was very much on purpose. It's also because the 3D printer that I have, if I wanted to go much bigger, I would have to print it in parts and then do a little bit of some assembly.
Right.
And, sort of a manufacturing 101 thing. The less time and work that goes into a thing, the more your profits hold.
Right.
And the same goes for the monster trucks. The monster trucks were a harder design. And actually, they mean a lot more to me. When I was a kid, my favorite toys that I had were the Matchbox Supercharger monster trucks.
Mhm.
It was like one of the first lines of monster truck toys in the 80s. I got a couple of them last year for my birthday. My wife surprised me and got me a couple of them. I hadn't had any in decades. But she knew I was always kind of glancing at them on eBay and going, one of these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she got the playset arena for them and 2 or 3 of the trucks.
Oh, wow.
And it, of course, sent me on a horrible spree of buying all the rest.
Yeah.
But I started to realize, like, oh, there were trucks from my childhood that they never made a toy of. God, I wish I could make my own. So I started, I've always been a nerd and a tinkerer. I started working with silicone to start molding parts from the trucks that I had. And that was going pretty okay. But, they're small parts. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of room for error there. And I just very offhand, I think probably last October or so, just said, boy, if I had a 3D printer and I could figure out how to do 3D modeling, I could probably just print some of these parts, but that stuff's expensive and it seems like a lot of work. I'll just keep tinkering with this, and never thought of it again.
Right.
And then Christmas came, and I had a 3D printer under the Christmas tree. So I set to work. I was like, well, I'm going to figure out how to make. I wasn't even thinking of making stuff of me. I was making toys to just sit on my shelf.
Yeah.
Because there were no shows happening. So who was I going to sell a Perry Von Vicious toy to? And so I started messing with them and making them. And I realized, like, oh, yeah, this actually, once I have sort of a base of how one goes together, I can keep making more if I just keep designing different types. So my collection started to grow. And when I started doing the human monster truck thing, I thought, oh, I bet I could make one of me. And by that point, I had made the figure of me, the 4-inch, but I also will print it in a little 1.5-inch, so it's muscle scale. Remember the muscle figures?
Oh,
from the
80s? Yeah.
So I have those too, and I was like, I bet if I kept making it smaller, I could just have a little me hanging out the window like he's driving. And that's exactly what I have on the truck. Is when you zoom in on it, there's a little me with his arm out the window and his head screaming.
That's so
That's
coming
cool.
out.
great.
And it is Hot Wheels scale, and the beauty of it is it prints. You think with all the moving tires and everything, because it does roll just like a Hot Wheels. You'd think, oh, that's got to be a little bit of some work to put together. It actually prints in just two parts.
Wow.
The body prints, and then the entire chassis with the wheels all print as one piece with the axles already inside. So when
Wow.
it comes off the printer, all I have to do is turn it over, set it on its wheels, and roll it back and forth a little. And the teensy tiny little supports that go between the chassis and the axles snap off, and now it's just free rolls. So when I put these together to sell them at shows, it's literally I have two parts, one little bit of hot glue, pop it together, toy's done.
Wow.
So I've been doing that, and all self-taught. How to do all the modeling and the printing, which is a whole thing. When the printer comes, it's just a pile of parts. So I had to put that together and program it and everything, all learning as I went. And fortunately, I'm just nerdy enough and just handy enough that it came together quickly. And now I'm the rare wrestler that has toys at the merch table.
That's what I was gonna
That's
say,
so
man.
awesome,
Like,
man.
talk about that's a totally unique merch item to offer. Like,
I'm a collector. That's something that I would be instantly drawn to. Like, I'm a figure collector, so
Shoot me a DM.
Okay.
yeah, we got to have a Perry Von
Oh,
Vicious for the
absolutely.
studio.
Yeah, I actually just I have these little 3D printed because the walls down here are concrete.
Yeah.
And I've been slowly decorating the gym. I have these little plastic shelves that I 3D printed because then I could just hot glue them to the wall.
Nice.
And if I need to, I can just rip them right off.
Yeah.
And they have wrestling figures going across them with a little LED strip. And I just added a Perry to the lineup after I've had the toys for months. I just didn't think to put one there.
That's so cool,
awesome.
man.
Yeah, I have toys all over the place in here. I'll keep them all over the place. So that's awesome.
So what man, that's do they do well? Like, compared to like your t-shirt sales and 8x10s and stuff like that?
What's been really interesting is having those has actually driven my t-shirt sales up.
Wow.
I thought it would be because a lot of the merch that I came back out of COVID with was just overstock that I had previously. I had 2 new shirt designs that went on the table, but then I had another 4 shirt designs on the table that were they were old. 2 of them were of a tag team that doesn't exist anymore. And then I had the toys. And I expected some people are going to buy like the new shirt, and then I'm sure some of the toys will go, little kids see a little action figure, they're going to want it. But they're a little pricey when I sell them. The figures are 20, the trucks are 20.
Yeah.
When you look at like a Hot Wheels in the store and it's $6, and then this one's 3D printed, so it's all plastic, so it will break if you play with it like the ones from the store. It feels like a tough sell. And I've been really, really pleased with how it's all gone. Like at this point, I'm practically out of shirts. I just did an inventory after this weekend. My monster truck shirt design that matches the toy. It's a monster truck with me hanging out of it.
Yeah.
I have 1 of those left.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, in a very short order, because I only got those 2.5 months ago was when I got the order in. So those went quickly, and I started looking at all the others, and they all moved. And as far as the toys, it's hard for me to keep track of how many I've sold because I'm always printing new ones. Like even when I'm off at a show, I've always started a fresh print on the printer before I go, and it's running. So I'm making new merch while I'm out selling the old. But I do know the first weekend I had the monster trucks out, I started the weekend with 12 of them that I had made. I had 3 shows that weekend, and by show 3, I didn't have any left before the show started. I had fans coming up who had messaged me, and I felt so bad. They had messaged me on Twitter, oh, I really want one of those. If you can save me one in this color or one in that color. And I was like, I'll try. I'll see what I can do. But, then you're standing at the merch table. You lose track of what's gone.
Yeah.
By the last show, I was out of those. They were gone. And that's repeated a few weekends now, which has been, no complaints here.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, the
amazing.
collector world's crazy right now anyway, but that's something that would draw me in. And I love that's such a good idea.
Yeah, you're tapping
I love it.
into that. I mean,
And I'm excited that, up here in the Northeast, because we get all this snow, I'm about to hit a big lull in bookings. There's from the beginning of December to like early February is very quiet. There will be a few, but
right.
it won't be every weekend. And I'm going to use that time. I've been working on a few. I have new designs. So series 2 of the Perry figure and series 2 of the monster truck are coming probably beginning of this next year. And it's possible I may have another printer as well. So I may be turning them out faster and in fact in higher quality.
Ooh.
And I'm really, that for me, that's as much a great announcement for anybody else as it is for me, because to me it's a new toy, and for them it means new toys. So
Yeah,
it's a win all around.
So, if you were to define what makes pro wrestling awesome, what for you personally,
For me,
what would you say brought you into this world? What was the attraction? But how do you what is the definition of what makes pro wrestling awesome to you?
it's so, I've used the word a couple times. It's so visceral and so relatable, right? I'm of the generation that I was just about getting ready to have like my first teenage jobs right around the time that Stone Cold Steve Austin couldn't take his boss anymore and was giving him stunners. And, that was so relatable when you get your first job, because when you're a teenager, your first job is always terrible. You've always got some boss making you do something you hate.
Yeah.
And it's not that the boss is a bad person. It's that they need you to do the thing you hate, and you're a teenager and you don't want to do it.
Right.
It's the worst. I'm a lifelong straight edge. I've never had a sip or a puff of anything. And I think a big part of the reason that has held up so long is because my first job was working in the redemption center at the local liquor store. So all the empties came through me, and it wasn't a machine. It was me with a pair of gloves sorting them for the correct companies and counting in my head to ring up people's empties. And that's exactly the kind of job that when you're there, and it's everything that can go wrong and be awful and disgusting has happened already in the day. And then your boss gets on you about something. I loved my bosses there, and I still do, but sometimes you just want to knock them one. And so it became so relatable. And I think that's the thing that makes wrestling fun, right? Is like underdog stories and revenge stories, and you see someone who's been a complete jerk get their comeuppance.
Yep.
And it's always in such a simple way. It's the reason little kids can enjoy it so much. Is it's not a movie where the revenge is, oh, I undercut you for your company, like in The Social Network.
Right.
It's no, you said something very shitty to me, and now I have popped you over the head with a chair.
Yeah, it's the Joseph Campbell hero's journey with violence.
Yeah. I mean, I remember hearing early on that they are essentially morality plays.
Yeah.
But they're played out within this ostensibly a sporting environment.
Right.
Where you're trying to get a championship or whatever it is. And that's totally true. And it was something that as soon as I heard it, I watched wrestling completely differently. I can remember the moment it happened. I'd watched it probably starting when I was in middle school. So I'd learned what everything was. I knew the names of the moves. I knew the rules. I knew the characters. I knew all that. And then someone was explaining, I believe it actually may have been in Foley's first book. I was reading how it's a morality play, and that's all it ever was. I, at the time that I'm reading that, am in college as an English major with a strong emphasis in my degree of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And I immediately, the connection was made. I go, oh, wow, yeah.
It really is, man.
Yeah, and it was the perfect storm to sort of drive me into it too, because I had also been a theater geek in high school. Again, feeding the
Same,
ego, had to
same.
be performing. But at some point, I went from being like all the other theater geeks who were small. That's,
Yeah.
in a rural town, if you're big, you play a sport, and if you're small, you do theater.
Yeah.
At some point, I had a growth spurt and became 6'3", and at the time, probably around 240 pounds. So not a huge size difference to what I am right now. Hard to get a good role when you look like that. You're either the knuckle dragging henchman, the drooling, doesn't know his own strength, strong guy, or I don't know, a tree. Like, it's hard to have the leading man role when the girl who's in the leading girl role is a foot and a half shorter than you, and a kiss scene at the end of the play causes people to call the police.
Right, right.
So I had that growth spurt, and it drove me away from theater. And it was right around this time that I was starting to see, like, oh, wrestling's just storytelling. It's morality plays.
Yeah.
That someone in college said, you used to do theater and now you're a giant. This is theater for giants.
It's
Have you
perfect.
ever thought about doing it? And that kicked around in my head till about a week before I got my degree, is when I decided, like, yeah, the minute that degree's in my hand and I'm done here and it's in my rearview mirror, I'm finding out where to go train.
That's
And
awesome.
sure enough, I had my first training session was in August after I graduated in May.
Wow.
Wow.
That's awesome, man. Well, Perry, before we let you go, we have one final question that we ask everybody before we go. So the pandemic's over. You're making towns. You're in a car. You can have 3 wrestlers in the car with you, alive or dead. Who's making those towns with you?
Wow, that's really good. Obviously you could start throwing out like big names and stuff, but at the point I'm at right now, personally, to me, it's Rip Bison,
Love
who
it.
I'm always in the car with anyway.
Yeah.
We're attached at the hip. I'm sure he's sick of me at this point. Neither of us would ever admit to being friends, but here we are. It'd be Rip Bison, Johnny Torres, who is not currently active. He's an announcer these days, but he's someone who was in the ring the first night I went to train, and we debuted the same night in the same match. And he's still in the car with us all the time. Those two are completely indispensable to me. Rip, because he will push me to do very stupid things on shows, to take very dangerous risks, and that's what creates the big moments.
Yeah.
He pushes me out of my comfort zone. And Johnny Torres, because I don't think there's anyone whose advice has helped me more at any point in my career than the conversations he and I have had in cars in the last 3 to 4 years. And I imagine I've probably only scratched the surface talking to him. And then the third other person, if we're filling the car up here, would be Levi Shapiro, who was my absolute best friend when I lived on the West Coast.
He's killing it right now too. With
and as far as I'm concerned, it's long overdue. I remember the first night I met him was at a company called Devil Mountain Wrestling, and we wrestled each other on the show. It was the first time we'd ever met. And as soon as the match was over, I turned to the guy who was my manager at the time, Matthew Theall, who's another. I love him to death. He's not really super involved in wrestling anymore, but he made a solid 5 years of my career. I remember turning to him and saying, like, of everyone here, I think this Levi kid's the one who's got a shot. Like, there's something about him. And he goes, that was his 3rd match ever. And I was like,
wow.
Okay, yeah. Because you can just read it on people sometimes when you see them in the ring. There's something about the way they move. There's a level of confidence in what they're doing. And specifically, there was a battle royal that night, and I watched him get eliminated. And the way that he allowed his body to just be launched recklessly while staying in control to protect himself was the kind of thing that you don't see all that often. And I saw it again. I had the same exact feeling when I moved back to this coast and I met Rip Bison. I remember actually telling someone, "This is my East Coast Levi Shapiro."
That's a good 3. Rip, Levi, and Johnny. I like it, man. We have to do this again. I feel like talking about only scratching the surface.
Oh yeah.
We didn't get into your origins. I wanted to ask you about Mutually Assured Destruction's origins. So much to do. We're going to have a Perry Von Vicious part 2 in the near future. If you would be down for that.
Of course. Yeah. I work from home. As long as it's like it is right now, where the sun's going down early and the chickens are going to bed, I've got the time.
Love it.
So let everybody know where they can find you at on social media.
Yeah, fortunately, I was an early adopter, so on basically every platform, I have at Perry Von Vicious. I have it on Twitter, Instagram, not very frequently updated TikTok, but it is there. I can be, if people are trying to book me, Perry Von Vicious at Gmail. If you want to see clips and matches that I actually have permission to share. Some people need it on their channel for financial reasons, but the stuff I have permission to share, you can find those at youtube.com/Perry Von Vicious. And of course, the big one, the important one, is prowrestlingtees.com/Perry Von Vicious. Got to make that money. The rest of them don't pay the bills, but that one just might. There's some good designs on there, and I'm sure there will be new ones coming soon. I'm with this lull that's coming up, it's the time to reach out to the artists and get some new stuff done up. So I've got some very silly ideas in mind for future shirts.
Awesome.
I can't wait to see those, man. I had a blast with this conversation. I love that it went place. I love when we get to go outside of wrestling a little bit. So we'll have to do this.
Those are the best ones. Those are the best ones.
That's fun, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. And part 2 will be coming soon. We got to do it.
Yeah, we got to do it.
Thanks,
Let me
man.
know.
Have a great evening.
Thank you for having me.